Hello, and welcome to another episode of I Just Want to Be Included. My name is Veronica Olson, and today I get to spend time talking to my friend Lisa about my experience with having a non-binary child. There are so many issues and stories to share about this topic. We are just scratching the surface. It is the first in many conversations I will have on this podcast. As I have stated before, I know that gender identity is a tough topic for people. You may not like or agree with everything you hear on this podcast, and that's okay. The goal is to bring some humanity to these issues. People working through gender identity issues are human beings with thoughts and feelings. They have family and friends who love them and are trying to help them find their place in this world. There's no place for hate, making others' lives difficult, or dehumanizing people. As always, everything said in this podcast is based on personal thoughts, opinions, and experiences. Nothing said should be taken as professional advice. Everyone is different. Every situation is different. Please always find professional help in your community to deal with whatever issues you or your child might be facing. Enjoy the episode. All right, so today I again have Lisa with me, but we're going to kind of flip the script a little bit, and I'm going to take the opportunity to tell one of my parenting journey stories with one of my kids, and Lisa is going to play more of the interview role and asking questions and helping me kind of tell my story so it makes sense and hopefully answers questions. So Lisa, you take it away.
Hello, Veronica. Yes, good afternoon. I just want to be included listeners. This is Lisa. I'm going to ask some questions. Veronica has a story to tell us about one of her children. Basically, the first question, Veronica, is tell us about your child, when they came out, and how old they were, how that happened.
Yeah, so I have 4 kids. This is child number 3, born female. And they came out in August of 2020. So it's during COVID. You know, we're very much still in lockdown, chaos.
Right.
Nothing is normal. And they were 16. And they kind of came to me and said, at first they told me they were gay. That was what they first said to me.
And what was happening the day that they told you that?
Yeah, we were going to my parents' house for a family get together. My sister was in from out of town and her family. We were celebrating birthdays. Mine was one of them, of course.
Right.
It totally tracks with this kid, to be honest.
Not an inconvenient time at all, right?
But I was holding like dishes or stuff in my hand, and we're getting ready to walk in their house, and I hear, "Mom, I'm gay," and I'm like,
"You're like, what? What
okay,
was that?"
What am I supposed to do? We're walking to a house full of people. I don't know how to deal with that, So we walk in and get through the evening, and then the next day they come back to me when I'm by myself. Of course, all this is happening when I'm by myself. My husband's not there, which also tracks with this kid. And so the next day they came back to me and said, well, what did you think about what I told you last night? And I said, well, I love you no matter what. I'm always going to love you, whatever choices you make. And they said, well, it's not that I'm so much gay. It's non-binary, dual romantic, ace.
Which means?
Yeah, I had no clue what any of that meant. I stared at them and they said, do you know what any of that means? And I said, no. I had not even heard those words before.
No.
And so I really had no clue. And so they gave me just a really quick rundown from their point of view what that was. Basically, non-binary means I'm neither male or female, right? The dual romantic part, my understanding was, I could fall in love with either gender, or have a relationship with either gender.
Okay.
And then ace is like an asexual aspect. Like, I'm never going to have sexual intercourse. That's not part of, relationships for me. Um, so they kind of defined it. And my first thought was, that's a lot. Those are
Yeah.
really big
It's
things.
a lot to focus on. And how old were they when they told you?
16.
Right.
16. And, I remember being 16 kind of. And, you're in this dichotomy of, you think you have to have it all figured out, and you think you know things, but you know nothing, right?
Right.
And so, I said, my main concern at that point was like, that's a lot to declare, and I don't understand all of that, because I legitimately did not.
Right.
But I said, I love you no matter what, and I'm here for you no matter what. One of my first thoughts, honestly, and thank God these words did not come out of my mouth, was, okay, if this is what you are, that's fine. But let's not tell anybody.
We're not going to
Let's
tell
keep
anybody.
it secret.
Yeah, right.
Because that would be easy for me, right?
Right.
That totally not fair to the kid. But as a parent, that was my first reaction. Like,
Yeah.
okay, well, let's just keep this between me and you. And so there's an honest parent reaction. But luckily, I did not say that, because that would not have gone over well.
You win a star for parenting that day.
Yeah, you got 1 point, half a point. So, they kind of left that with me, and I just said, you're 16,
Mm-hmm.
and I just want you to understand that what you're feeling right now might be different in a few years.
Right.
Right. And I don't want you to label yourself as something that you're feeling right now, and then in 10 years it'd be different.
Right.
And they didn't really understand that. I did not get a great response to that. And one thing I didn't appreciate at the moment, but over time I did, was how long my child had struggled with these issues.
Right.
So it's easy for me to say, well, I know you're feeling like this today, but in a couple of years it might be different. When the reality is, they've been struggling with this for probably a year, at least at this point.
Wow.
Right. And so it's not something that they woke up one day and said, oh, I'm going to do this because I saw somebody on TikTok doing this. That's not what was going on. It's, I don't know where I fit in. And that this kid struggled with fitting in for a lot of their life. They were just that kid for a lot of reasons. But it was something that they had done a lot of thinking about. And they also were very aware that, that was going to change how I saw the future for them.
Right.
They said, well, you may not have any grandkids. Well, I'm not giving you any grandkids, or, you've probably dreamed about a wedding and,
Right.
all these other things. And I kind of had to say, I've been in crisis mode for like 15 years being a parent and trying to get through the day. I haven't had time to plan anyone's wedding.
Well, not to mention during COVID, you were just more concerned probably about getting toilet paper. I mean, making sure you had enough supplies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we were all more concerned about toilet paper than anything else, I think.
That too. But even prior to that, I had 4 kids, and I was trying to get through the day. I was trying to get through the week. I had not sat down and planned anyone's wedding or dreamed about grandkids because I still had lots of kids in my house.
Right. You're probably dreaming about the day that they all went out of the house.
Yes.
Left the house.
But it did tell me something as a parent, that they understood that them coming out to me was going to change me too. I
think that's really, really great that they had that perspective at 16. I think that shows an intelligence that some kids don't have, and an emotional maturity that some kids don't have too, because they don't consider the harm or the good that their decisions are going to have on other people.
Yeah. And that had definitely weighed on this kid. You could
Right.
tell.
Do you think you were in a state of shock when you first heard the news?
Um, definitely. Definitely a state of shock. Um, because I just didn't know what to do with that information.
Right.
And so my first instinct was just to Google non-binary.
Mm-hmm.
And in August of 2020, there was not a lot of information out there.
Right.
There just wasn't.
Right.
You know, I think I found one article that some mom had written about a child who wanted to be called they and them, and just kind of saying, hey, look, people, this is what she wants. Get over it. We're getting over it and we're moving on.
Yeah.
But it was like a very rare thing. It
Mhm.
wasn't, it's not like there were all these articles about it. It was still very new. And then
Right.
I also looked up Christian parenting and non-binary because I'm a Christian parent.
Right.
And there was nothing.
Absolutely
There was absolutely nothing out there.
Right.
And so I'm like, all right, what do I do now? I have no information to work with.
How did you get used to changing the pronouns? And of course, they changed their name as well. But
Yeah.
how did you get used to changing the pronouns and that kind of thing with your child and how you approach them? Because I still have a difficult time with it myself.
Yeah.
When I talk to you about them.
Yeah. So it's a process.
Yeah.
And the name part and the pronouns were the change happened at the same time, but they're two different issues, right? Because you're completely putting a different name on a kid that you've been with for 16 years.
Right.
And so I kept telling this child, you have to be patient. That's not something I can just automatically do. To take one name that we've used for you for 16 years and insert something different,
Right.
And they got very frustrated
Okay.
with me. Well, why don't you try? And I was like, you need to give me time. As a parent, I kind of needed to grieve.
Right. That's an interesting concept because, we do grieve when somebody changes. And sometimes it's really difficult to accept a change and to be able to deal with that. And like you said, you do need time. And, how did you give yourself time to deal with that when they're pushing you to use the new pronouns, the new name, and that kind of?
It was really difficult. And this was all happening during the holidays.
Right.
And so one thing they did was come up to me and say, well, can we get new Christmas stockings, to hang at the fireplace? And I'm like, well, we had some that were, still Disney and kiddish. And so I was like, we can upgrade. But then I found out they were prodding me because they wanted a different name on there.
They wanted to change the name on the stocking.
And so now I'm faced with the holiday with putting a stocking up, or I have all these ornaments from school, or these ornaments that,
right,
have been purchased with all the kids' names on them with
right.
this old name. What do I do with that stuff? And it just, it took a while to get past that. And my child was frustrated. And all I could say was, you need to be patient. This is hard. And it's not, I'm saying I'm not willing to do it,
Right.
but it's going to take time. You just have to give me time. One thing that helped with that was my youngest, who was probably 13 or 14 at the time. Sometimes we would go out walking and I could talk to her about, because those two kids are close.
Right.
And, I said, so, this person's wanting me to call them a different name. Have you called them a different name yet? And, she said, it was really hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
But then I called them a new name and I saw the smile on their face.
Oh,
and
wow.
That's all I needed. I know.
Got the mom heart right there.
Yes. And so, and that kid's very good at just like clarifying things for me sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it hard even for this kid to change the name? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they saw what it meant to their older sibling.
What a touching subject. Wow.
And that's
Veronica,
all they
thank you.
needed.
Yeah.
Now, did it automatically change for me overnight? No.
No.
But it gave me a different perspective on it,
Sure.
and then the they, them was difficult just because it goes against everything we were ever taught in school.
Right.
And when you start looking at things through a gender neutral lens,
right,
you realize how embedded that gender language is in your mind.
Right. I remember one conversation you and I had on the phone. We were talking about this child going to school, and you said they are going to school, and I was thinking, how many kids are you talking about?
Right.
We're talking about just the one kid, but
yeah,
we're talking about a they, them versus a she, her. And that was difficult for me. It's still difficult for me.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of people around your family have struggles with it.
It still throws people off.
Calling the different name as well.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
That brings up another question. Have you been able to reveal this news to other family members? I don't know if you want to share that on the podcast or not, but
so I did tell my parents and my family.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, and it took like a year to get there.
Sure.
Not only because I needed to find the words to define what was going on.
Right.
And to talk about my feelings and thoughts. I needed to make sure my kids were comfortable because there was a lot of fear there of being rejected. We've got these Christian grandparents. They may not accept me anymore. And so
they may not accept you as a parent and your family. Is that what you're saying?
This was more for the kids' point of view.
Oh, right.
I know my parents.
They love you.
Well, yeah, I think so. And I know my parents, so I thought this is going to be hard for them to understand, but I also know them enough they're not going to cut you out.
Right.
They're not going to turn you away. That's not how they're going to respond. But, my child was very fearful of who's going to accept me and who's going to still love me. Right. Mm-hmm. And as a parent, I have no control over that. No. Right. I can't answer that. I can, try to reassure you, well, they love you. And I think it's going to be okay, but I don't know. And it's really hard. And so, I had, at this point, I had 3 kids keeping different secrets about themselves.
Right.
So I went over my parents' house on January.
List.
Yes. I was at my limit. And I went over to their house on January 1st, 2022. Okay. Said, Happy New Year. I need to let you in on the loop of some things going on with my kids. Let's start with this one.
Yeah.
And so I told them and kind of let them say what they needed to say and answer questions.
Right.
At that point, it was also difficult because I didn't know who all knew in my family. I knew that my kids had told cousins.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I assumed that this kind of news was big enough that probably got to mom and dad. So my siblings and my, brother and sister-in-laws probably knew, but I didn't know. Right. And it was really hard. We couldn't really have conversations at this point when my parents don't know, grandma and grandpa don't know. And so it was awkward. And so after I told my parents, then I went home and I sent a text message to all my siblings. And I said, Happy New Year. I just came from mom and dad's house. And, I let them in on what's going on with some of my kids. And this may be stuff you already know. I don't know how much you know or not. And I just laid it all out there. I said, went through each kid, this, and this. This one can non-binary. And I just said, we're going to love and support our kids. If you have any questions, if you have any concerns, call me. But I set the tone of we're being upfront about this. We're not hiding anything. I'm willing to talk about it. And this is how we're handling it from here forward. Now, that was my family. My husband, how he's dealt with his family is very different. Right. But my family most of them live in the same community. And
Right.
so realistically, it's not a secret we could keep for long. And I knew that. So I felt a sense of urgency
Mhm.
that was different from my husband. So I got to a point, and once I told my parents, then I started telling some other people. Then I felt like, all right, I can tell other friends, but I kept it really, really tight. And I had compartmentalized that kid. In the house, I called them one name. When I left the house, I called them a different name.
Oh,
And I
okay.
did that for several
So
months.
you would call them their birth name when you left the house,
Yes.
and the chosen name when you're in the house. I
Yes.
got it. Okay,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Because my parents live tenants away,
Right.
and some of our social circles connected still.
And it took a year for you to be able to tell them.
And I was like, I do not want them to find out about any of this from anybody else besides me or my kid.
Right.
And so I was very conscious of
Sure.
how and where and when I talked about it.
Hmm.
And I literally compartmentalized it. In the house, this is what we're doing outside of the house until we're into a place where we're ready to deal with it.
Right.
We're reverting back. And it's funny that I just did it, and
Was this child accepting of that? Did
yeah,
they
because
accept
they
it?
did it too.
Okay.
They go to grandma's house,
Hmm.
and I watched it happen in real time. I watched cousins call them the preferred name
Hmm.
when no adults were around.
Oh,
As soon as grandma walks in the room, then they revert back to the birth name.
right.
And I'm like, no one told you to do that. I never said don't tell grandma and grandpa, or keep it from them. I never said that.
Okay.
They automatically did it.
They knew.
And when I saw that, I'm like, oh, this isn't good. Like as a parent, I was like, I I don't like this. This is getting to a level of it's uncomfortable and it doesn't feel good, and we can't keep doing this. I'd
Right.
done it myself. But I was like, it can't go on. We need to move forward, and what it is what it is. But you
When we
know,
talked about my story, I told you that when I didn't tell my mother for 8 months about the court case and about Ella and everyone having the social services being involved and everyone having attorneys. I prayed to God almost every single day to
yeah,
give me the timing, to give me the right moment. And of course, He did answer that prayer.
yeah,
He did it in 8 months after everything
yeah,
started.
yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Veronica, did you pray often about when to do this and how to do
Um,
this
daily.
to your parents, to God?
Um, and it went through certain stages with me, because telling my parents certainly became a big issue, but it wasn't even the first one, right? Like my initial prayers were like, what do I say? What do I
Right.
do? Because I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to do the wrong thing. I don't even know what that is right now. And so my initial prayers were like, God, just what is the right thing to do?
Right.
What words need to come out of my mouth? What words do not need to come out of my mouth? Like that's where I was at. And eventually it did get to a point where I was praying about, okay, how do I talk to other people? Starting with my family.
Hmm.
So absolutely, my faith was a huge part in just getting through this, because I did not know how to deal with it, and I knew I didn't. It was the thing I was going to be able to figure out on my own.
Well, a lot of people, I really hate this phrase, but did you think this could be just a phase? You know, a lot of people say that when kids are making big
Yeah,
changes when they're that young. I mean, 16 is pretty young.
yeah. I mean, initially, I thought maybe,
Hmm.
but it quickly became evident with this kid that they'd been thinking about this a long time. And as soon as they started talking to me and letting me in the loop, it was, well, when can I get my name legally changed? And, you know, I might want to do hormone therapy, and I want top surgery, and I want, there was a list of things they were already talking about.
Right.
And I really felt over my head at that point, because these are huge things. Um, and I was like, it's not that I disagree with any of it, but you need to understand that you have to like yourself and love yourself for who you are. All these other changes can help, but they're not going to fix things. They're not going to solve,
Right.
if you're unhappy with who you are as a person, going and getting a legal name change isn't going to fix that. Right. And so, I didn't feel like it was a phase for very long because the conversation was just, well, you know, I want a legal name change and I want to dress differently. Clothing was a big issue.
Right.
So many of those things became issues. And so I really couldn't think about it being a phase for very long. I had to deal with the here and now.
Well, and then the idea too of like the public restrooms and things like that. Where did that go for you guys with this
Yeah.
decision?
So at the time we're in COVID,
Right. So that's not
so
too much
it
of an
was
issue.
not a big issue. Um, they were working at a local fast food restaurant, but their dining room was closed.
Right.
So I did find out that they used the men's bathroom, but the chances of someone else being in there with them was very minimal. It was not a very risky thing to do. Um, Now that came kind of ahead when we were getting ready to go on a family trip to Disney World, and this at this time we're like March 22. um we're coming out of COVID,
Right.
and we went on a family vacation, and we're in the car before going on this vacation, and this child says, well, I'm just not going to use the bathroom at Disney.
For the whole day.
uh we were there for a week,
Okay.
and I said, so that does not seem like a good plan to me.
Right.
We're in Florida, it's going to be hot.
You're gonna be drinking water
Yeah,
or something.
not using the bathroom. Well, there's no bathroom for me there. And I said, okay, well, what about the family bathroom?
Sure.
No, those are nasty. I don't want to use a family bathroom. I said, okay, well, this is a place with thousands of people. Are you really going to be comfortable walking into a men's bathroom in an environment where really it's thousands of people?
Right.
And they're like, I don't know. And, so we went back and forth a little bit. And I finally just said, you do whatever you're comfortable with, whatever you want to do. Do not follow your dad into the bathroom, because that's not something he can handle at this point. So if you want to go use the men's bathroom with a bunch of strangers, you go for it. Do not follow your dad in there.
Well, that brings up another point too, Veronica. Another question I had was, did this child come out to you and their father at the same time?
No. No, they did not.
So by this trip in March of 20,
Oh yeah. At this point, we'd been dealing with this for,
he knew. Okay.
At least a year and a half at this point, right?
Okay.
This was not new, but all these different issues with the bathroom and the name and the clothing's a whole nother thing we can talk about. All these different things
Yeah.
happened and conversations happened. So I really couldn't just sit back and say, oh, this is a phase, because we were dealing with the practical everyday things
Right.
of life, of changing gender and what gender means and what it looks like. And so it was a non-issue, the whole, is it a phase thing? I don't know, but this is where we're going. And so, we're, we're going on this road, and I don't know where it's going to lead, and I don't know how I'm
Right.
getting anywhere, but we're on it,
Did you feel any guilt for this change in your child? Did you feel like there was anything that you could have done differently? I don't know if that comes up with this kind of thing, but I know it comes up with like estrangement and things that I've been through.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. Guilt. There are things I can feel guilty about in general, right?
Everybody has things.
Every parent can
Yes.
make a list. With this specifically, I don't know if I felt guilt. I only felt guilt when I found out, and this was later on, um, I found out from one of my other kids that this child, this non-binary child, really, really struggled with coming out and really thought that they might be kicked out of the house. And really, like, what do I do if mom and dad kick me out? And that broke my heart.
Right.
And that I felt guilty about, because I'm like, I don't want any of my kids to ever feel like I'm going to kick them out.
Right.
To think that.
So that made you maybe feel like you did something that could have been.
Obviously, I didn't give them a foundation of feeling like we love you no matter what.
Okay.
Right. Because just to think that my kids would think that's an option that we would do, that was hard to hear.
It is. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today, and a big thank you to Lisa for helping me tell my story and playing an interview role today. Next week, we will continue our discussion on my parenting journey with a non-binary child. Hang in there. We are all doing the best we can. See you next week.